In this series, we've delved into a lot of Thomas & Friends locomotive characters, but unfortunately mostly that. It's one of my favorite parts of Thomas & Friends, but it hasn't really made its way into this series yet, besides when we talked about Annie and Clarabelle, that being rolling stock. And since recently we've been on a narrow gauge kick, I thought it'd be fun to talk about some of the narrow gauge stuff, in specific some of my favorite kinds, that being the Slate Trucks. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about them, their history, and most importantly, the models of them. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Rusty returned to see Duncan being pulled up the incline. "I tried to warn him," said Rusty.
The Slate Trucks made their first appearance in the Railway series, but there's something to be noted about their original illustrations. Despite having sentience, in the original books, they were never depicted with faces. They would first appear in The Little Old Engine, which was published in 1959, and they last appeared in Great Little Engines, published in 1985. In the DVD The Thomas Way, the Slate Trucks were actually re-illustrated in a Mr. Perkins segment to show the story of trucks. In this segment, the trucks are illustrated with faces, unlike the original. They also take a basis of the two-bar wagons featured on the Tallyclin Railway. In 1995, the Slate Trucks were introduced to the 4th season of Thomas & Friends, and have basically appeared in every season the narrow gauge characters did. They've only appeared with faces in the 4th and 5th seasons, however, and throughout the show have been based on various wagons used on different narrow gauge railways in Great Britain. But getting into their models, their O-gauge small scale models would follow the same two-bar design. They were completely scratch-built to run on O-gauge track, that being to the gauge 1 scale standard. And the wheels of the Slate Trucks were sourced from Hudson Skip 4 whole disc wagon wheels, which were made by Slater's Plasticard. Their coupling hooks and chains would also come from Slater's Plasticard, although the hooks were cast in resin and used as well. The insides of the trucks are flat, which suggests to have been a one-part mold. The two ends and the two sides are identical. The resin coupling hooks would also prove to be fragile and break easily. The chassis for the Slate Trucks were made from Coopercraft O-gauge GWR match trucks, which were given modifications, also featuring a portion of the middle cut to shorten out the length, and a piece of styrene attached for stability. These things were true kit bashes. A total of 30 different facial expressions were made for the Slate Trucks, but only 21 were ever shown on screen. These faces are made the exact same way as all of the other faces. They're sculpted in clay, and from that, resin casts are made of a silicone mold. What's interesting about the Slate Trucks faces, however, is they would later be reused for standard gauge tankers, that being in the 4th season episode Toad Stands By. What's also interesting is some of the Slate Trucks were given a lowered buffer beam. But what I find most interesting about these models is since the engines didn't have a lot of space in their bodies, that being for the receiver and batteries for their eye mechanisms, instead these were put in Slate Trucks and disguised as a slate load. It's pretty easy to tell when this is being done, as these slate loads will sit significantly higher than the regular ones. In the 4th season episode Trucks, several broken trucks were made, essentially being made from the same molds as the last, but designed to break apart easily. Some debris was also made from the same molds. The small-scale models were predominantly used in the 4th season, but like the engines were sometimes used for in-between shots in Season 5. The small-scale Slate Trucks would make their last appearance in the series in the 2005 special Calling All Engines, where several appeared behind Rusty in Thomas's dream sequence. One of the Slate Trucks was sold at Fectus, with Peter Sam's small-scale model, but I'm happy to report that currently 4 small-scale trucks with their faces are in the possession of Twitter user Thomas Tank Merch, thankfully where we know they'll be safe. The 5th season introduced large-scale models of the Slate Trucks, for honestly the same reason as the engines, simply ease of filming and reliability. From Season 6 to 12, the larger models were used almost exclusively, and the Slate Trucks in particular were upscaled in production to be compatible with the different models. These models were built to a larger scale than Gauge 1, but still ran on O-gauge track. A further batch of these Slate Trucks would also be made for Season 6. They were close to 16mm scale, but slightly larger. Just like their previous counterparts, they were mostly made from resin, right down to the axle boxes. The coupling hooks and wheels, however, were instead sourced from standard gauge 10-mile ones. Trucks produced in the 5th season can be distinguished by their black buffer beams, whereas the Season 6 trucks have light gray ones. Both of these variants have appeared throughout later series. The face masks on these trucks were reused from Gauge 1 troublesome trucks, which were made the same way as the last. Following Season 6, however, they would no longer appear with faces. A set of broken trucks were made for Seasons 5 and 6. Just like the last, they were designed from the same molds, but made to break apart very easily. The broken Slate Trucks were also occasionally seen scattered around as set dressing as well. In the 5th season episode Make Someone Happy, one of the large-scale bodies was used as a shipping crate for the carousel horses that Percy and Oliver were collecting from Cranky, and a lowered buffer beam variant of these Slate Trucks were also made. It appears to be a 5th season truck, but the conversion itself wouldn't occur until season 6. Currently, 2 of the large-scale trucks with their faces are in the possession of Twitter user Thomas Tankmerch. They own a 5th season truck with a lowered buffer beam and a standard Slate truck from the 6th season. Believe it or not, the Slate Trucks did have close-up models built. Actually, 2 of them. One made for Season 4 and one made for Season 6. The Season 4 close-up model would only appear in the episode Trucks, but the Season 6 close-up model would make a few more appearances, and also had several differences from the last. It had a different number of rivets on the metal edges, completely different floorboard detail, and was a much lighter color. It also featured perfectly square buffers, rather than beveled edge buffers like the last. Like most close-up models, these were not actually finished, and never sported faces since we would never actually see them. From that, however, we move into CGI, where just like the narrow gauge engines, the Slate Trucks would make their first appearance in Blue Mountain Mystery, being scratch-built in CGI by Nitrogen Studios in 2011. The pre-existing designs of the model era were used as referencing, but also recolored in a dark brown, cream, and varying shades of gray. 4 new variations of Slate Trucks were also introduced, however. These wagons are based on the ones used on the Tallyclin, Chorus, the Welshpool and Lawn Fair, and the Vale of Rydal railways. None of these Slate Trucks have been depicted with faces, and several recolors of these wagons have been seen. One of the Slate Trucks closely resembles a more accurate representation of the basis of the previous existing Slate Trucks. In 2017, Jam-Filled Toronto reintroduced Slate Trucks, but not just normal Slate Trucks. Slate Trucks with faces, but not just Slate Trucks with faces, standard gauge Slate Trucks with faces. This being for Journey Beyond Sodor. They were based on the previous O-gauge large-scale models and shared the same face as the tankers. It was also made to be a bit larger and had 2 extra planks added to its front to accommodate the face. These trucks are significantly scaled up from their narrow-gauge counterparts, as I'm sure you could tell. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up the history of the Slate Trucks. Like I said, I find it really interesting to talk about the rolling stock, and we haven't really had much of a chance to delve into that. So if there's anything in specific you guys would like me to talk about, be sure to comment down below and I'll be sure to add it to the next poll. Really quick, I also want to apologize for my voice this episode. It's kind of been cutting in and out on me, so I probably sound kind of different throughout the video, but I didn't want that to be an excuse not to make this, and hopefully regardless of such, you guys still enjoyed. If you guys did, be sure to like and subscribe for even more train content. There's always more stuff on the way, and as always guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
The chain pulling Duncan's slate cars couldn't hold the weight. It suddenly snapped. Duncan plummeted down the incline. Help! He yelled.